Sally, thank you very much for being here today and for being such a willing participant in this series. This is about the third of these interviews that I've done, and our topic today is performing with credibility and presence. And in preparing for this, so Sally and I have had a bit of a chat about it, and I think that I would say, actually, just kind of in thinking about this from my own experience and what that means for me, that, you know, if I think about situations I've been in the past in my own career, the sorts of situations where there's maybe senior people in the room, or there's an important presentation to deliver, or there's an important conversation to have. And I think for me, and this is probably just some insight into my own psyche, but what I've tended to view those scenarios on or as an opportunity almost to have a career limiting experience rather than a career advancing experience, which is probably the wrong way to look at it, but it's just, you know, some of what goes through my own mind when these important situations come up. So what we wanted to do today was just have a bit of a chat about, well, what does that look like? How do you perform with confidence, with credibility? How do you show up with executive presence? And Sally, you're someone that's had a lot of executive experience. So we've worked together before at Adobe, but you've not just worked at Adobe, you've worked for a number of blue chip companies in an executive capacity. I know that you've been in scenarios where there's lots of senior people in the room, sometimes the most senior person actually as well. And your role previously has been to, I guess, work in partnership with senior people in organizations to really think about not just where they're going from a strategy point of view and from a business point of view, but to really think about partnering with them on their personal journey as well, and being a business partner to them, both strategically and for the business, but for them personally too. And so I guess, just in terms of jumping straight in, I think I would just say, Sally, you know, when you think about this topic, so when you think about performing with credibility and presence, what has that looked like for you? Like what comes up for you when you think about that as a topic?
Absolutely. Thanks for that, Gail. I think one of the things that is really, really important is knowing your business. So I think in terms of getting credibility, you absolutely have to have business acumen. And it's always been a bit of a mantra of mine with my teams, is about ensuring you understand your business. I just think it's you know, it's great having that functional expertise and the HR expertise, which is obviously our profession. But I think you really do need to understand your business if you're going to have a voice at the table and have that level of executive level engagement and discussion. I think the other thing that is really key and important to me on a personal level is about being authentic and showing up as who you are. I mean, obviously you have to make sure you are presenting yourself in a certain way if you're in an executive environment, but I think that authenticity and being genuine is extremely, extremely key. And I think sometimes that can get a bit lost in the boardroom.
Yeah. And I think that's a really good point, actually, when you think about authenticity and showing up as yourself, because I guess one of the things that would always go through my mind is I need to be a certain way, or I need to fit, or I need to show up differently than who I genuinely am. And I think I'm starting to realize now that that's actually not necessarily the case. But when you think about authenticity for you, like how would that manifest itself for you? So if you imagine yourself in the boardroom, but authenticity is important to you, what would that typically look like?
And I think, just to speak back to your point, I think there is an element of risk associated with not being authentic or trying to be somebody or behave or give that kind of mask, because you will come across as not being genuine. And I just don't think that that people necessarily engage as well in that sort of environment.
Yeah.
So going back to your question in terms of authenticity and what that means for me, I think it's that self-awareness as well. I think one of the things that I've learnt throughout the many years that I've been working in a corporate environment, I think having that emotional intelligence and that self-awareness of the way that you behave, the way that you communicate, the way that you come across, and the impact that that has, I think helps that authenticity, but I think is really, really critical to success and being credible in those environments.
Yeah. And what do you think, when you think about your scenario and your personal situation, what do you think have been the biggest factors in your own success when you think about your own career journey?
I think it's probably going to sound a bit cheesy and a bit corny, to be honest, but it's really genuinely true. I've had the opportunity to work with some really amazing people. So not just at an executive or a senior level, but just generally within my peer groups, with colleagues, with my team. And I think having that focus on it's not about having a self agenda, it's about having a team agenda, and building that team around you and respecting the capabilities, the leadership, the competencies that other people also have, I would like to think has really contributed to the journey that I've had. I think the other thing that I would really encourage is about being open to development. I don't think you ever stop learning. And I think having that growth mindset and always being open to new ways of thinking and new ways of doing things, not for the sake of just doing it right, but just because you want to have an open mind. There are going to be ways of developing and, you know, being progressive. And I think that's really also extremely critical.
And what's that look like for you? Thinking about having this growth mindset, learning.
I think willing to be challenged, not always. I think it's a balance between, there will be certain situations and examples where you have to know the answer to certain things, but I also think it's okay to not always know the answer, and to be open about that. And I think for me personally is finding people that I aspire towards some of their capabilities, and being open to learning from them. So seeking out that kind of knowledge, that different way of doing things, or you know, asking or watching and observing how that person behaves. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I actually really like what you said about it's okay to say that you don't know something. You probably sometimes it's probably better to say I don't know rather than just shoot from the hip and make it up, because you might actually make it up. So and if you're standing in front of a senior executive or the CEO and you know, give the wrong data or the wrong information, then actually that's going to impact your presence and credibility more than if you actually say, let me come back to you, I'll get that information for you. So I think, you know, that's definitely. Yeah, that makes sense. And Sally, just in the nature of your work, so the sort of work that you do is, you know, balance between what are the needs of the business, but also what are the needs of the people. And so throughout your career, you've had to kind of walk that tightrope in many ways and strike that balance. How have you done that?
I think the two are completely interlinked. When you look at it, I think business performance, personal performance, business growth is completely dependent upon your people, right? So I think it's important to, if I put my HR hat or my business hat on, it's important to make sure that you create an environment that has got that growth mindset that I talked about, and a culture. I think it's important that you get some of the basics right, some of the operational basics right, so that you can focus on some of that more value-added development for your people. I think that cultural balance is really important. I think the other thing is making sure that you've got the right people agenda or strategy that's right for your business. So there isn't like one, textbook people strategy, and it's going to be different depending upon what the business needs at that particular time. So you're going to have those longer term goals. And I think that's absolutely key to getting that right and getting that balance. If you have a people strategy that's completely disaligned to the business goals, then it's not going to work. It's not going to have the impact. So I think finding that balance between those two, and again, that goes back to my point about them being completely interlinked, is really, really important and powerful.
Yeah. And when you think of yourself, so, one of the key roles that you've had in the past, Sally, is really looking at, how do you, as the head of a region, which that's been a big role for you in the past. So, thinking about what are the needs and priorities within the region, and being very focused on, what's important to us here locally within our region, but also then thinking about balancing that with what about, what's going on in corporate, and what's the corporate agenda, and how do those two things align and come together so that you're representing both and being credible around both of those things.
Yeah, so I think it goes back to the theme about balance, like you said, and striking that balance between that global corporate perspective and then what's going on in region. I think your executive team is looking at the regional team to be its eyes and its ears on the ground, and to present a storyline and a picture of what is actually going on in the region. But you need to, I think, to be successful and have that ear of corporate as well, you need to be able to there needs to be a level of familiarity in the storyline. So you need to strike a balance between creating an awareness and an understanding of what's going on in region, but also understand at a corporate level, okay, what are we focusing on? Where are those synergies in what's happening in the region, so that talk track and that storyline will resonate. And I think that's got to be really important, because one of the risks, and it's a phrase that I've heard many times throughout my career with this regional thing, is you've got to be again, that balance piece, to not be seen to be going native, as you say, so that in region all you're focused on is what's going on in region. You need to also be able to align that with what's going on at a global level and the partner to do that. And I think, one of the things that I learned over the last few years was, whenever we were in that sort of environment where we're in a business review environment with the CEO and the executive team, it was also thinking about, okay, what do we need at a regional level that globally or at corporate they could help support us with to achieve what we needed to drive and achieve. And I think that's very important. So it's about, okay, we understand what's going on, but this is actually what we need, and can we get that support?
So it sounds to me, in all of that, Sally, I just wrote a few words down there just to kind of capture that. It sounds like there's something around being clear what your own story is, and to be able to tell that story. So there's a little bit of the art and flair of being a storyteller, because I think that in itself does give you credibility and presence if you can tell the story. But then along with that, to be able to storytell well and for it to resonate, which is clearly important when you're thinking about your audience, you have to be able to listen as well, because if you're not listening, and you're not actually, you know, taking in what's important to the audience and listening to what resonates with them, you can't create a story or a meaningful message that is going to resonate. So I think, you know, being able to tell the story but to listen are key. And then the other thing I wrote down was, you know, there's something around having clarity about what's important to you, being able to ask for what you want in a compelling and credible way, I guess. You know, to be clear and crisp about, we understand what's required, here's how we're aligning to that, and here's what we need to be able to make that happen and to deliver that.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, you've summarized that back beautifully.
Yeah. Okay. So Sally, let's get into the nitty-gritty of this then. So when you are in those high visibility situations, the heat is on, the pressure is up, what's that been like for you? And please be honest, because that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for some vulnerability here as well. I mean, I know what it's like to be in a situation where, you know, it's important, you've got something to share or say or present, or, you know, you're in a QBR, or, you know, there's something going on that's important, and we're all human. And, absolutely, you know, the nerves can start, you know, I mean, for me, it can be, you know, butterflies in the tummy, and the need to self-manage is critical in those situations. So I don't know if you can maybe just describe a scenario like that for you, and just share with us, what do you do to self-manage in those situations that might help other people?
Okay, yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, speaking to your point about, you know, we're all human and we all, you know, I don't think I've ever met anybody, irrespective of level of seniority, level of experience, that doesn't get that sort of adrenaline, those bubbles, you know, that little bit of nervousness at the beginning of an important situation. That whatever that important situation is to that individual, right? And it's a natural physiological reaction that we have. That actually, that, you know, research shows, neuroscience research shows that little bit of adrenaline, that little bit of stress, actually can you know, create higher performance. Not too much, because otherwise that, you know, puts you in a position of threat. But I think for me, in some of those situations where I have had to stand up or represent in front of the CEO, in front of the executives, or speaking at a conference or being interviewed like this, I think for me, one of the things that I've learned is about being prepared. So make sure that you have all of the information that you need as much as possible, and give yourself the time and the space to prepare, because I think that really, really shows if you don't. I think the other thing is where you can, try to understand the expectations of you in that situation. So what is your audience, and what are they going to be expecting from you? Because again, I think that can really help in terms of the way that you show up, the impact that you have, and that you can make sure that what you're saying is really going to be directed in the right way and resonate with people. I think in terms of, it is so critical that you're focused in whatever that scenario is, and that there are no distractions. So I think making sure that you don't have anything else that is going to distract you, so that you are in the moment, is super, super important. And there are, you know, people have different ways of doing that and helping them. You know, one of the terminologies and the neuroscience is about clearing the space. So we know through research that if there is too much going on in our brains, we can't apply the same level of focus, and therefore we don't perform. So making sure that, try out a couple of ways of helping you to clear that space in your mind, so that you are completely focused on the scenario or the meeting that you're in. So you really have that in the moment kind of mentality and space and openness. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. And if you do get a tinge of nerves or a little bit of adrenaline, is there anything that you find helps? I mean, for me, for example, there's a few things that help me. You know, if I try and smile, because when you smile, it's difficult to feel as nervous or anxious or stressed if you just let yourself smile, because your brain it doesn't understand the difference. So if you physically smile and just, you know, say to yourself that everything's fine, it does help, you know. And I think different people have different kind of coping mechanisms. Any coping mechanisms like that you would use, or do you just kind of
breathe? I think it's probably like fundamentally basic, but no, seriousness. I mean, you know, make sure that you can breathe. One of the it said to me once was about, imagine if you're speaking in front of an audience. I think it was my grandma or something like that. Oh dear, don't worry about it, just imagine them in their underclothes and then it all will be fine. It will be like, you know, sort of, but everyone is human, right? So I think that time to prepare up front, if you are feeling nervous, I think make sure you've got, you know, stuff around you like water and things like that. And most people have, when they're nervous, tend to have some kind of habit that they'll do, whether it's clicking a pen or something like that. But be aware of that and get feedback from people. Find somebody that you trust and that you feel safe with. And whenever you are in that sort of scenario, do a little bit of a debrief afterwards. I always think that's really helpful as well.
Yeah, I think, you know, there's training obviously that you can do for those sorts of situations.
Sure.
I mean, I've had presentation skills training, and you know, I've been through the horror of being recorded, you know, when you're in full presentation mode and having it played back and getting a critique on it. And the thing for me was I fill gaps, you know, when I'm thinking about what to say next, I do a little bit of you know, and so I fill the space with sound, because I'm aware of the silence. And that was the big thing for me, that if I became more aware of that and just let there be a space and don't fill it, it actually comes across as a lot more credible and confident. And I really notice that now, even when I'm listening to people on the radio or people being interviewed, there is more credibility and presence with people that just don't do that. If you listen to somebody reading the news or presenting the news, they don't do that. They're just skilled at, they can talk without doing that little fill thing, which I think makes a difference.
Yeah, I think that absolutely, I totally agree with you. And I think that power of silence and taking that breath and that pause to kind of regroup your thoughts is absolutely fine.
Okay. So just a couple more questions, Sally. We're coming up towards the end. What would you say has been the biggest challenge that you've had, and what have you learned from it?
Okay, so in all transparency, I think the biggest challenge for me throughout my career has been balancing my different hats, as I call them. And what I mean by that is we all have different roles within our lives, right? So career has been a very important one for me, but also being a mum, being a wife, being a sister, being a friend, having all of those hats and trying to get the balance that's right for me has probably been my biggest challenge. But not just necessarily about having the balance. And I think in my journey, I think I've got the balance that's right for me, right at times. But I think it's not just about having the balance, it's having that presence and that space, so that when you are being in whichever hat you're in, you are absolutely 100% present to be in that hat. And I think that's been the challenge for me. So it's, you know, if I'm talking to my son or my daughter, when I was in the corporate world, it's like being distracted by email, or as well as trying to be with them. And I think that's probably been my biggest challenge, and my biggest learning is, how do I allow myself to be wearing those different hats, but being present when I'm wearing that particular hat? Because we all have those different roles, and it's okay, right? It's okay to go to work and, you know, you're a mum or you're a wife or and that's okay. And having that acceptance, I think, has been.
Yeah. So it sounds like just having clarity around your boundaries, I guess, would have helped with that as well. Like, just, you know, just being clear, well, I'm doing this now and I've got a boundary around that, but there is a boundary, and then I'm going to move on, and then it's something else that I'm doing. You know, you're not kind of stuck in one thing.
And that's okay. And I think that's okay. And I think You know, I've learned, again, it goes back to that authenticity and being genuine.
Yeah.
I've learned throughout my career, the more genuine, the more authentic you are, the stronger the relationship and the trust you will build with people, and the level of respect, because it's human, it's normal, it's okay.
Yeah, because you know, it's human nature, and having that trust is going to make a big difference there. Yeah. Okay, Sally, we are almost out of time, so I'm just going to wrap two questions into one just to finish off. And I always try and ask these questions at the end of a session like this. So the questions are, what do you know now that you wish you'd known 10 years ago? And in thinking about that, what's your number one piece of advice that you'd give to emerging leaders?
It's going to sound a little bit repetitive, but it's very interlinked to the conversation that we've been having. I think what I wish I'd known, so I talked about my journey and my learnings, was how important and how enriching and rewarding it is to be authentic, be genuine, with people that you work with, and that's okay. So, and I think being able, or feeling comfortable, a little bit more comfortable in having some of those boundaries and saying, maybe not no, but yes, I can, but at a certain time. So if there was something, and sometimes, and being in the role that I've been in, you have to be very aware that you are role modeling certain behavior as well, because people will look at what you're doing if you're in a leadership position, and will tend to mirror that. We know that. I think so. You know, my encouragement for emerging leaders is authenticity, being genuine. I think that growth mindset and constantly looking for opportunities to develop, because we never stop developing, and listening. I think listening is really key.
Yeah. And just to finish off, just thinking about that growth mindset again, you know, as a leader that would be looking at how to grow talent, how to develop talent in an organization, how important is it, do you think, that, you know, demonstrating that growth mindset is, you know, when you start thinking about being given opportunities, being asked to step forward, how, you know, how you're viewed and how you're assessed in an organization, which is a big part of how you advance in your career.
I think it's fundamental. I think you know, if you don't have that growth mindset and that willingness to learn, to evolve, then that's going to be career limiting. And I think from a leadership perspective, it's also leadership limiting, and it doesn't provide a culture or an environment for a high performing team, or a, you know, diverse team, which you absolutely need to have.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, well, we're out of time, so I'm gonna leave it there. Sally, thank you so much for agreeing to do this. It's been great connecting with you again, because we connected again just a few months ago, and it's been lovely getting to know you again. And I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to be with me today and to be vulnerable and to share some of your experience.
So thank you. I hope some of it has been helpful and useful for folks. So thanks ever so much, Gail.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you. So I'm just going to say goodbye to everybody now. Thank you very much for joining. And if you are watching the recording, thank you for tuning in, and I hope you found it helpful. So that's it for today. Thanks very much.